Welcome back. It's another Thursday, another set of predictions. Week 7 on tap today. Of course, I'm joined by a co-host of this channel for the last couple of weeks. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Let's go. It's Amir. I'm back. I had to take the week off last week. Got caught up with some stuff with football and everything, but I'm back and I'm ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's busy being a collegiate football corner, but I'm happy every single week you try and make time for the podcast. So, without further ado, we're going to get straight into it. Last week, I had a 12-3 record. I'm going to ask you here in a second, but on the season, 66, 27, 71% correct rate. It's not the greatest, but I'm doing pretty okay. What was your record last week, though, Amir?
Man, so last week I was actually 12-3 as well. The biggest game that kind of stumped me and I was kind of sick about it was that Eagles versus Jets game. With
Yes.
that game, I'm pretty sure that was America's favorite pick. And that kind of moved it, to 12-3.
Yeah, I mean, we're Browns fans, and I'll be the first to admit that even though I had the Niners winning, I was happy. I wasn't even mad that the Browns won that game. But the Eagles, for sure, I was like, yeah, I'm going to be 13-2. It's going to be amazing. But then the Jets somehow keep pulling off these crazy upsets against the Bills and the Eagles now. Regardless, though, you were 12-3 last week, though.
Yeah, I was 12-3 and my season record is currently at 63-30.
63. I mean, we're right there. And you can't
Yep.
really fake these. They're all on camera, of course. If you want to double check us, go ahead and search through the last couple Thursdays. But week 6, of course, I'll say this past Tuesday, we introduced basketball back to the podcast as the NBA season is a week away, less than at this point. So now we're going to have to transfer our Tuesday information and videos to the Thursday show. So jam-packed show today as we have our power rankings from last week. This was going into week 6. As take a good look at this as of course number 1 and number 2 lost. So we're gonna have some shakeups here. As the Tampa Bay Bucks, they lost their game pretty handily to the Detroit Lions. Of course, the Lions are pretty good, so you can't dock them too much, but they drop out of the list. And right outside of the list, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, which I think the Bengals are back, and the Browns, of course, after their huge win against San Fran. I just couldn't include them in the top 10 because, I mean, that game was terribly officiated. Should I have had any other teams drop out of this list, in your opinion? Just to clarify, this is going into last week.
Oh, going to end the last week. Okay. Okay.
Is there any team that I should be dropping out of this list other than the Bucks?
Ah, man. Shoot. Honestly, this isn't really a bad list. I said the only team you can somewhat make a debate about is the Jags, especially now that Trevor Lawrence is kind of banged up.
Right.
And it'll be kind of be hard for them to improve, from here on out offensively.
Absolutely. But let's get into it. As you had no idea this was going to be on the show, but this is why you're here. So at number 10, though, I do have the Seattle Seahawks dropping 2 spots. Of course, there's a typo there, but they won their game, or they lost their game last week. But I still think that there's not 10 teams better than them at this point. The Bengals have a lot to prove, and the Browns, they got a big win, but can they keep it going? That's always the question with the Browns. The Rams were another team that were in question for this number 10 spot, but the Seahawks for me, my number 10 team. And as we go through this list, just stop me as if you have any questions or if you want to talk about a certain team's placement, good or
Mhm.
bad. At number 9, though, the Baltimore Ravens, they won their game and they re-enter this list. And they're at number 9 as they had a fumble against the Steelers, but they got a bounce back win last week. They might continue it here against the Lions. It's a big week for the Ravens and the Lions in week 7. At number 8, the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jacksonville Jaguars, despite Trevor Lawrence being banged up, they won last week, and as of right now, Trevor Lawrence is slated to play, so I'm going to assume that he's healthy going into this next week. So with that being said, they're at my number 8 team. Again, if Lawrence is out, then that kind of changes things. At number 7, staying pat, we have the Dallas Cowboys as they won. They took care of business against the Chargers. You can't really move them up because they didn't look good, but you can't move them down because they beat a formidable team in the Chargers. At number 6, we have the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills, they, of course, took care of business, and they remain at number 6. Any changes that you would make here in 6 through 10?
Now, honestly, if I was to make a change here, I'd probably move Baltimore over Jacksonville. Um, you know, with Baltimore, you can kind of see flashes in their offense, and their defense is just so elite. I think it puts them over the top.
Absolutely. Now, if Amir, I don't know if you've been watching Tuesdays, but I'm very stingy with this top 5. I really want to make teams earn it to, I guess, get the top couple spots in the league. As we've had teams like Dallas have that crazy week 1 or week 2, and they were barely in my top 5 because I want teams to earn it.
Yeah.
And San Fran, they won 5 in a row. They earned the top spot for 5 weeks. That's going
Yeah.
to change here, though. And not yet, though. Week at number 5, you can argue this team could be higher, but the Miami Dolphins, they lost 2 weeks ago pretty handily to the Bills, and they beat the Carolina Panthers. So they didn't show much because the Panthers are the only winless team left, but they did look good. They just didn't beat a really good opponent. So I can't really move them higher than 5, but I'm okay with having them over every team above them or under them. So I have them top 5. They just didn't show much because they beat the Panthers. And number 4, of course, the Eagles lost their first game, and not only did they lose, they lost it to Zach Wilson. So they dropped to number 4 on this list, dropping 2 spots, of course, from the number 2 spot. And here's where the questions come in. At number 3, the 49ers. They dropped 2 spots from 1 to number 3. Could you argue they're still the best team in the league? Sure, but you lost at the number 1 spot, so you got to move down because everyone else in the top 5 won last week. So the Niners, they dropped 2 spots for me, but no doubt, maybe they're still the most complete team in football. I want to ask you, out of the Chiefs and the Lions, who do you think is coming in at number 2, or who would you have at number 2 at this point?
Well, if I could have a number 2, it'd be the Niners, but
Yes,
between KC and the Lions, I'd put the Lions at 2.
At 2, we're going to differ here. I'm going to put the Chiefs at 2.
That's
And again,
crazy.
coming up until like an hour before the show started, I had the Chiefs at number 1, but I don't know how much longer I'm going to be able to say that the Detroit Lions are the number 1 team in football. So the Chiefs, I think the reason I've had them over the Lions for so long is because the Chiefs barely lost to them in week 1 without their second and third best players. Now they have those stars back, and Rashee Rice is also taking a step up. They also get another piece back in McCole Hardman. I think the Chiefs, fully healthy today, would beat the Detroit Lions in a one-on-one matchup. However, the Detroit Lions just overall, they're one of the 3 teams that have a top 10 defense and offense. They look like they can do no wrong after that week against Seattle. And Seattle, or Detroit for me, given the losses to San Fran and Philadelphia, I'm going to have them at the number 1 spot again, maybe to stay, but they also could drop as San Fran and Philly still look like the most complete teams in football. And I guess final thoughts here. Do you think I'm overreacting to Detroit's success early, or do you think they've earned it with top 10 offense and defense?
Honestly, I don't think they've earned it just yet. The biggest reason why, I mean, their schedule has been kind of cupcake easy so far.
Yes.
Besides, week 1 when the Chiefs were kind of banged up, they're missing their second and third best player. If you go back and even watch that game, them missing Chris Jones was the deciding factor. They could not stop the run in the second half, and that team struggled defensively, and they still barely squeaked out a win by 1 point. And you could even argue, that one, drop by Kadarius Toney late in the game that altered the whole entire game. And if I could maneuver this around, I'd probably go San Fran at 1. I go KC at 2. I'd even go Philly at 3, Miami at 4, and Detroit at 5.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly like, I'm not going to argue too much about that because all 5 of these teams, I think, are clearly the top 5 in the NFL right now. You can have them really in any order. I couldn't justify keeping San Fran at Philly at 1 and 2 after big upset losses. So no doubt they can return to that spot. But as of right now, I'm going to show some love to Detroit, who's been red hot. But moving over here to the Offensive Player of the Week. Again, we're moving everything from Tuesday to Thursday. So very quickly, we'll run through these awards. Jared Goff is going to be my Player of the Week. Again, I think they're the new number 1 team in football. I mean, he had 350 plus yards, 3 touchdowns in their 4th consecutive win. I guess any thoughts here about the Offensive Player of the Week? I mean, we could have gave it to some other guys, but I just gave it to the quarterback who's having an MVP level season on the number 1 team in ball, at least in my opinion.
Honestly, this is definitely a respectable Player of the Week. Just like you just said, this offense is red hot. It's crazy to see how Jared Goff is still kind of disrespected and overlooked, for having an MVP caliber season. This is kind of the question coming into this season. Like, can Jared Goff take even more of a step, be more comfortable in this offense, play on more fire? And that's exactly what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, I could have gave it to Raheem Mostert, Tyreek Hill, but those guys have already had their light, and each and every week they're just continuing to dominate. So I wanted to spread it out here and give it to Jared Goff. Defensive Player of the Week, I'm going to give it to Martin Emerson. I mean, we could have gave it to maybe Micah Parsons, maybe Myles Garrett, or even Dalvin Tomlinson, who that's a guy that didn't have the counting stats, but he had such of a big impact on the game. but I gave it to MJ Emerson. This is the guy that had 7 tackles, his first career pick. He was targeted 6 times in this past game against the Niners. Of course, he was guarding Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel. He didn't allow a reception for the entire game. I think this was his first true. I mean, he's had moments, but I think this was his breakout game as he's now. I think people will view it as an elite cornerback duo between MJ Emerson and Denzel Ward.
Definitely.
But but moving over here, we have 6 teams on bye this week, heading into week 7. Of course, we have the Bengals, Houston, the Jets, and the Titans in the AFC side of things. We have the Cowboys and the Carolina Panthers. Of course, the Cowboys are number 7, not number 10. Excuse the typos. But out of all of these teams, who do you think needs the bye week the most? As we have 3 AFC teams coming in, or 4 of these teams are coming in off of wins or multiple wins, while the Panthers and the Titans are still trying to figure things out.
The biggest thing that needs is bye is definitely the Bengals. The Bengals, second half of the schedule got some challenging games. They still got KC coming up late in the year. I think right after the bye, they got the Niners, and after that, they got Buffalo. They still got to play Baltimore again, too, and Pittsburgh twice. So, the Bengals got to take this bye week off to regroup, kind of get even more healthy and figure this offense out.
Yeah, I think, they were my Super Bowl favorites coming into the season. And I think I agree with you here. They need this week to get back to Bengals football, not just barely squeaking by with, 2 wins against some mediocre opponents. But I would agree with you here. The Jets are also very interesting as maybe Aaron Rodgers is back in 2 weeks. Who knows, right? But moving over here to Thursday night football, of course, that's tonight. The 4-2 Jaguars on a 3-game win streak. They're playing the New Orleans Saints at New Orleans, 3-3 for New Orleans. This is a very interesting matchup because if Trevor Lawrence was here, I'd say no doubt I have the Jacksonville Jaguars on the road in this Thursday night game. However, Trevor Lawrence might not play tonight, and CJ Beathard, of course, you guys remember him for his terrible outings there in San Fran, but he's going to be the quarterback if Trevor Lawrence can't play, and that's going to rely a lot on, can ETN have a big game? Can this defense step up against New Orleans, which shouldn't be hard because New Orleans offense has struggled really all season. But who do you have in this Thursday night game? As Jacksonville has some questions, but so does New Orleans.
So for me going into this game, I'm going to go with Jacksonville right here. This Saints offense has looked, piss poor at times, and Jacksonville has been a lead at stopping the run, and so I think what they're going to do is stop the run and pretty much force Derek Carr to, throw with his arm. But, just like you just said, if Trevor Lawrence doesn't play and he ends up getting pulled out, I'm obviously going to switch back to New Orleans because without Trevor Lawrence, I mean, this team is pretty much useless.
Yeah, I think that's really just the consensus here. If Trevor Lawrence plays, even if he's banged up, I'm taking Jacksonville. But if CJ Beathard is the quarterback, it's kind of hard to imagine that New Orleans doesn't get this win. So I'm going to take New Orleans just to be safe and say that, Jacksonville might sit Trevor Lawrence this week. So I'm going to take New Orleans at home if CJ Beathard is the quarterback. Any last thoughts about Thursday? I mean, there's not really much to analyze here.
This game is going to be interesting. It's either going to be really boring or, really good, no in between.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually that's the Thursday night MO is either high scoring or a very ugly game. Regardless, moving over here to Sunday, we have the number 1 team, at least in my opinion, again, taking on the Baltimore Ravens. So the Detroit Lions going to Baltimore. Detroit 4-game win streak. Baltimore, they got a much needed win. They look back to themselves. In this matchup, Detroit has a top 10 defense and offense. Baltimore's right outside. I think they have a top 10 offense, just not quite there with defense. They're 12 or 13. Regardless, who do you have in this matchup as this might be the game of the week?
So right here, being a Browns fan, I really hate to, cheer the Ravens on, pick the Ravens here, but I'm going to go with Baltimore at home. The Lions have not seen a defense like this. And, you can make the argument, last week, if Baltimore doesn't drop 10 passes offensively, they're improving to 5-1 and they're a top 5 team in the league.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens, I wanted to go with them, but since you went with them, I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions here. I'm going to ride with the number 1 team in football, in my opinion. I mean, this is a team that has just shown barely any flaws early in the season, and I still think we haven't seen the fullest potential of this Lions team. I mean, they have an MVP front runner, not a front runner, but they have an MVP caliber quarterback right now in Jared Goff and a Defensive Player of the Year front runner in Aiden Hutchinson. I think the pass rush is going to get to Lamar. I think they're going to put a lot of pressure on these young receivers to make some plays. And no doubt in my mind, I think they can actually limit Mark Andrews in a game like this. If Lamar and the Ravens win this game, it's going to have to be Lamar being Superman, I guess is my prediction here. But I am going to go with Detroit to keep rolling on the road. They're 6-1. But any last thoughts about this game? Is again maybe game of the week.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the games of the week, man. I'm excited to watch this.
Yeah, I mean Sunday night or Sunday at 1 o'clock. It's definitely going to be at least on the back burner because we are Browns fans. And moving over to our matchup, we have the Cleveland Browns at 3-3 going to Indianapolis at 3-3. I mean, this is a matchup that's very interesting because the Browns have the #1 defense in football. They got a huge win last week. We, I'll say this. I don't know if Deshaun Watson's going to say, okay, hey, I see the team is legit now. They got a big win. Maybe I should play through this injury. I don't know if that will fly. I don't know if he's going to be able to come back and play through an injury if he wants to. But regardless, I think the Browns still should get a win here. But all I'll say this before you go ahead is this is definitely a trap game for the Cleveland Browns. I think going into this game, we have a really good defense. We have a little bit of momentum. I think we might also get in our own heads and I guess not take the Colts lightly as they have Gardner Minshew, a backup quarterback who hasn't looked the greatest. We might come into this game lackadaisical, and this might be a trap game for us.
Yeah, I'm hoping this is a game that the Browns, attack with the mindset of, we're going to build our confidence. I hope they don't come into this game playing down to the competition, buying into the hype, the fact that they're the best defense in football. And man, this offense really has to take the next step, if we really want to be able to compete. The offense is really what's been holding us back. The defense is playing, probably the best Browns defense I've seen in my lifetime.
No doubt it is.
Yeah, like 100%. But I'm still gonna go ahead and take Cleveland here. Just like you just said, Minshew has a guy, that kind of gets a lot of hype. Like, oh, he should be starting, after playing a couple weeks. Once he's thrown into that starting role and kind of the pressure is put on him, he kind of shows why he's a backup. And so, I think he's going to struggle big time against his defense. We're going to get after him. We're going to completely shut the run game down, which is what Indianapolis, needs to rely on with Minshew starting. And I think the Browns are going to take this.
Yeah, I think this again. I think it's a trap game simply because Zach Moss has played on a different level. They still have a good offensive line, and they have Jonathan Taylor, a top 5 level running back in the NFL. So if they can control the line of scrimmage early, I think the Browns coming from behind. If we had PJ Walker starting, we might find ourselves in some deep water relying on a XFL quarterback. Other than Deshaun Watson, I think we can find ourselves in trouble on the road. But I will take the Browns here to keep rolling, to hopefully, again, like you said, to have that mindset of just keep attacking, keep getting these wins until our quarterback comes back. And I guess I'll say this. If PJ Walker's starting, please, Kevin Stefanski, simplify the game for him. I don't want to see him thrown into double coverage fourth quarter late in the game, trying to make a play. Simplify the game and just, I guess, rely on these running backs a little bit more. But I think it's definitely a trap game for the Cleveland Browns. Atlanta at Tampa Bay, battle in the NFC South here. We have the Falcons, I believe, coming off of a loss, and same thing with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Two teams, I think they're, fighting for this division, obviously, but I think at this point, these might be the two front runners to win this division. Who do you have in this matchup as I think this is finally the Bijan game, and that's all I'm going to say. I think it's finally the game we get a big Bijan Robinson game.
Bijan definitely might, ball out this game, but I'm going to go with Tampa Bay. And actually, fun fact, Ridder is 0-4, on away games in his career, and he's going to Tampa Bay, a divisional game. The Bucs still have that confidence. Baker still has that confidence, and I think Tampa Bay is going to shut this offense down and limit Bijan and Ridder and take control of this game.
Yeah, I mean I'll say this, and this is what also it doesn't make sense. It kind of counterintuitive, but the Bijan, I think he is going to have a big game. I think this might be the game where he finally takes over this backfield entirely, and it's not going to be really a 50-50. It's going to be like a 70-30 split with the rest of the backfield. But Atlanta has a top 7 defense. The Tampa Bay, they kind of showed their flaws last week, but I will agree with you here. I will take Tampa Bay at home. I think Baker and this offense is going to have a bounce back week. I think Rachaad White will struggle, but Atlanta has a good run defense, and Tampa Bay doesn't run the ball anyway. I think this game will come down to, can Desmond Ridder, outplay this veteran defense? And I just don't know if that is the case. I don't know if he can do that. even though he's on the, I guess he's been getting better and better each week. So I will agree with you here. I will take Tampa Bay at home to go to 4-2. Who thought that Tampa Bay would have
Yeah,
this many wins early in the year?
yeah, definitely.
Las Vegas at 3-3. I think honestly, when I was making these slides, I was like, that is the most surprising record so far. As I thought I had Las Vegas winning, I think 4 or 5 games coming into the season, which is disrespectful. But they go to Chicago. They play a 1-5 Bears team that just lost last week after a bounce back win. They need a win here in this game. I think I will leave this one up to you and make my judgment there. But I'll say if Jimmy Garoppolo is playing, I'm probably taking Las Vegas here. I think it all comes down to the quarterback situation in Las Vegas.
Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna take Las Vegas here. I think Fields has just been ruled as doubtful. And they got Tyson Bagent out here
Oh,
playing.
I forgot about that. Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Then we're taking Las Vegas here. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, because the only spark, this Bears offense has had is, Fields kind of extending plays and using his legs. So, the last thing you need is to put in a backup quarterback, not only a backup, but a rookie quarterback, behind this line. You got Max Crosby, who's leading the league in pressures on top of that. And so, I think Las Vegas, controls this whole entire game from start to finish.
Yeah, I mean, Josh Jacobs, maybe a big game. Maybe we can finally see Devontae Adams be Devontae Adams. But again,
Yeah.
that's never that's never promised. But moving over here, again, we're both taking the Raiders here on the road to an NFC East matchup. The 3-3 Washington Commanders got a big win last week. They are going to New York to take on the ice cold, the New York Giants, who have lost 4 straight games, and now Daniel Jones is out with a neck injury. They're going to be starting Tyrod Taylor here at home against a very tough defense, at least defensive front there in Washington. No doubt to me, I think it's a big Brian Robinson game. I'm going to take Washington here in convincing fashion. As the Giants, if they had Daniel Jones, maybe it's more of a question, but they don't. They have Tyrod Taylor, and I've seen that song and dance before. Give me Washington here on the road to frustrate this Giants offense.
Yeah, so I'm taking Washington as well. And I have a question for you. Are you taking the over and the under on 15 total sacks this game for both teams combined, man? These,
Both
both these O lines I think are bottom of the league, for most sacks allowed per game. So, man, this is gonna be a straight sack
um,
battle. And I feel bad for both quarterbacks.
No, I appreciate the question. I think 15, I know you're exaggerating. I think that's entirely too high. I think it's going to be one-sided here. I think, honestly, Washington is going to get up early in this game, and it's going to really just be a Brian Robinson game for the entirety. Hopefully they control the clock, maybe have some splash plays in there. But I definitely trust Sam Howell more than Tyrod Taylor, as crazy as that might sound, given that one's a rookie and one's a 28-year veteran. At least it feels like Tyrod Taylor's been in the league that long. But I think I'll say this: it's going to be under 10 sacks this game, but 8 of them are going to go to Washington. I'll say that. I think Tyrod Taylor's going to have a very rough day. He might not make it out of New York. The last 1 o'clock game here, we're going to have the Buffalo Bills, heavy favorites. I think they're 8.5-point favorites, going on the road to New England to take on the Patriots. Of course, the Patriots have lost 3 straight. And there's a lot of questions here for New England, as Mac Jones did look good last week. And I think once you actually watch the film, Mac Jones has looked a lot better than what the general media will tell you, as he's putting the ball in the right spots. His receivers just aren't making the plays, or they just aren't getting open. With that said, though, I'm not the biggest Mac Jones fan, and I'm going to have Buffalo here by 32.
Yeah, honestly, I was looking at this game. And this is going to be upset of the week. And I'm taking Mac Jones to throw for 5,000 yards.
Oh, even
I
at that
mean,
point, I don't even know if they're going to have a chance.
yeah, I mean, Mac Jones could throw for 10,000 yards and break every passing record, and the Bills will still somehow win. This Buffalo team is starting to finally find its groove, find itself here. And man, this team is starting to get scarier and scarier every week, showing that, they are not left out, showing that this offense is still competitive, showing that this defense is no joke. I'm taking Buffalo by 20.
Yeah, Buffalo by 20, no doubt. Moving over here to the 4 o'clock games, we have the LA Chargers, who I guess didn't look the greatest there on Monday Night Football. There's a lot of questionable play calling from Brandon Staley yet again in a big time game. They go to Kansas City in Arrowhead to take on the hottest team in football, maybe, as the Chiefs have won 5 in a row. And I guess this is your first time seeing the emojis. We've added emojis. So if you win 5 in a row, you get the Lombardi Trophy. I told Bakari that last week. So first time for you seeing that. regardless, I will take the Chiefs here. They got McCole Hardman back in a trade. That only adds more dynamic ability to this offense. McCole Hardman's going to be what they thought Kadarius Toney could be this year. And he's really just that field stretcher that has continuity with this offense. So there's not going to be an adjustment period. He's going to suit up this week and probably play for the Chiefs. The Chargers, on the other hand, I could see them winning this game. They're, of course, a very talented team. They're just facing the Chiefs. So I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, and Rashee Rice to have a big game here in Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking Kansas City here. I think this is a no-brainer here. Man, this Chargers team has been the most disappointing team this year by far. Going into this year, I had them kind of going in as Super Bowl favorites, but this defense and then them trading J.C. Jackson, this kind of showed as to why this team is just going to decline for the rest of the season. And just like you just said, they got Hardman back. They're going to add more speed, stretch the field out a little more, and I'm taking Kansas City.
All right, so we both took Kansas City. Moving over here to the NFC West, where we have the struggling Arizona Cardinals. Rightfully so. They're trying to get Caleb Williams. They go to Seattle to take on the 12th man in the Seattle Seahawks, who lost the game last week, but they still remain a top 10 team in my eyes for the Cardinals. They've lost their last 3 games, averaging only about 16 points a game. They're turning the ball over a ton. And I guess the biggest news for Arizona right now is that Kyler Murray is back to practice. But for Seattle, I think I'm going to have them win pretty handily here. Big Ken Walker game as they get back on the right track.
Yeah, I'm taking Seattle by 30.
Yeah, I think Seattle won both games last year by 10 plus. So no shocker here. Give us Seattle. And they wrote me off, but I didn't write back. Okay. Moving over here to, oh man, I don't know. What was it? Super Bowl 9? One of the Super Bowls where it was Eric Dickerson versus like the great, the steel curtain is what I was getting at there. But this was when I see these two teams, I think of that Super Bowl. Regardless, whatever. Pittsburgh at 3-2. They are coming off of a bye week. They go to Los Angeles to take on the Rams, who got a big win last week. And the Rams, to me, are a borderline top 10 team despite being 500. But who do you have in this matchup? Pittsburgh, I guess. Are they going to be better coming off of the bye?
I'm taking the Rams here. This is an interesting game. Pittsburgh has been a roller coaster of emotions here, but the Rams have been, kind of steadily showing that this is a capable team, and them getting Cooper Kupp back is kind of added to this offense, and I can see the Rams winning anywhere between about either a 1 score or like a 1 possession game here.
Yeah, I think all signs point to the Rams winning this game with Puka, Cooper Kupp, making Pittsburgh's life difficult. And honestly, if this Pittsburgh offense looked like it did last year, I'd probably take Pittsburgh in this matchup because T.J. Watt is maybe the best defensive player in football, and he would get after Matt Stafford with no run game. However, this offense looks terrible. It's bottom 5 in the league. At least that's what it looks like on a weekly basis. I will take the Rams here and Aaron Donald to have, an impact on the game like he always does. I will agree with you here. Puka Nacua gets back on track, and the Rams will take this one, making that division even more interesting. I've just now kind of realized that I had both AFC North teams losing this week. Maybe my Browns fandom is getting in the way. But the Green Bay Packers, they go to Denver to take on, I guess, the Mile High, if there is an advantage anymore. I guess home field there in Denver. Green Bay coming off of a bye. I think Jordan Love and this offense are going to be finally able to show a different dynamic as they get, for one, they're going to be fully healthy for the first time this year. They're going to have Aaron Jones back and Christian Watson. So they're going to have finally their full offense intact here going into this game. And sure, Christian Watson's going to be exited out of the game because Pat Surtain is going to have him on lockdown. But I think Jordan Love in this offense with Aaron Jones, A.J. Dillon, Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, given the also great defense, I'm going to take Green Bay here on the road as Denver. They have a lot to figure out on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I mean, just like you just said, Green Bay's finally back at full strength here. And, actually, I want to give a shout out to Russ. Russ has actually been quietly, putting together some solid performances.
Yeah.
In Denver, but, Denver just can't figure it out. And, the fact that, Green Bay can finally, play with some confidence now. They got their top running back now. And I'm going to take Green Bay here on the road.
I can definitely see Denver winning this for the sole fact that Jordan Love, once these teams got a little bit of film on him, he hasn't been the quarterback that he was early in the year. but
Yeah.
he's coming off of a bye week. I think this is a big week for Jordan Love in how the remainder of his season will go against a struggling defense and a team, like you said, that really can't figure it out. But my question to you is this. Let's say Denver continues on this path and they go, let's say 3-14 to end the year, or let's say even they catch a couple wins and go 5-12. If they're 5-12, do you think they go on to fire Sean Payton? Because at this point, that's two unsuccessful seasons in bad fashion, and you brought in a head coach that claimed he would fix things, but again, they were 5-12. So if they finish with a record like that, do you think they blow everything up, or do you think they kind of run it back yet again just due to contracts?
I think just due to contracts, they try to run it back again. Um, but right now it's kind of a position where I kind of wonder what Denver's going to do. Like I wonder if they're going to try their hardest to tank it out for Caleb Williams since they're 1-5, bottom of the league pretty much, and you know try to try their best to try to just prepare for the future. I mean, because right now, I mean, you're paying Russ a lot of money. This team isn't working out. I mean, realistically, you can't really trade him for much. I mean, because you're paying him a crap ton of money. And so kind of just keeping him here is just going to rot him away.
Yeah, I
Just make
think,
him go on the decline.
honestly, the only reason I asked that question is this. There's a quarterback in college football that plays in that same state, and he is most likely going to stay in college football for another season. If Denver comes into next year after losing Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton this offseason, and they're going to be bad next year, they could
Right.
be in a position to draft a former Hall of Famer's kid that also plays quarterback that could fix their issues. Do you think that if they don't get a Caleb Williams, do you think they should go after Shador Sanders? I guess that could also happen next year if they run it back. Of course, they would most likely be bad.
Hey, you mean that is very well a possibility, I mean, because Denver
I just
is in
kind of
the
thought of
spot
it on
where,
the spot. So,
yeah, I mean, that's definitely a possibility. I mean, Denver's in the spot where something has to change, whether it's a quarterback change, coaching change, like they got to figure something out. And so, I think this being the second year in a row that they're falling apart, they're pretty much going to do whatever it takes to, make something happen because they can't really get any worse.
I mean, all I'm going to say is Shador Sanders and Dion. I'm off topic here for sure because this game's just irrelevant. Um,
Yeah.
they should have went to Florida. I mean, they should have came to Florida. They would have been in a much better place to succeed. But moving over here to most likely in most eyes, the game of the week, the matchup of the week. We have Tua Tagovailoa. We have Jalen Hurts, former teammates at Alabama, and we have two very high-powered offenses. One led by Mike McDaniel, the other led by Nick Sirianni. Two teams that have showed minor flaws this year, if any. Miami hasn't, or I guess Miami, their defense is not their strong suit, but they're just putting up that a crazy amount of points where it doesn't really matter. And
Yeah.
Philly, on the other hand, they haven't even played their best football, at least in most people's eyes, and they're still 5-1.
Right.
In this matchup here, two very close teams. You can argue who's better, but who do you have in this matchup as unless you want me to go first, but who do you have in this matchup? And again, unless you want me to throw my take out there first.
I'll go first. And so, this right here, in my opinion, is definitely game of the week. It was so tough, choosing this game because, the Eagles, just like you just said, Hurts has been struggling, hasn't been playing up to par. But this team is still somehow 5-1 and still look somewhat dominant. And it's only a matter of time to Hurts kind of, flips that switch and picks back up on pace. I think this might be the game where Hurts, can kind of get back to it. This Dolphins secondary has obviously struggled, but it's like, this offense has had a counter to it. I'm going to take Miami just because I've seen more out of them.
Wow.
I've seen more, I've seen more consistency and dominance. And, the only way the Eagles will have a chance of winning this game is dominating up front, and kind of getting after Tua, forcing turnovers and putting a lot of pressure in his face.
I will differ here. I will take Philly. I know they're the favorites, but I also know Miami played Buffalo. Buffalo has a really good defense. In my opinion, though, Miami has not faced a defense that's at least as deep as the Philadelphia Eagles. And I think that they will get after Tua. They will make him uncomfortable. And when he was uncomfortable, that's why he had such a bad game against Buffalo. I think Philly, like you said, I think it is a get-right game for Jalen Hurts in this offense to really fire on all cylinders because they've shown flashes, but they haven't looked like the Eagles from the postseason of last year. I will take the Eagles here on the road or at home to, I guess, honestly, you can't even say dominate because I think both it will be an interesting matchup. The
Yeah.
biggest thing here is I will say I wish Jalen Ramsey was playing in this game.
Definitely, man. This would be a great game if Ramsey was playing. You know, I think once he comes back, he kind of showcases his versatility, just like how he did in LA. They kind of move him around in the slot, on the outside, stuff like that. The whole dynamic of the secondary will change, and this Miami team will be even better defensively. But now's not the time. And right now they're kind of just buying time for Ramsey to get back.
Yeah. I mean, no doubt. I think Miami, they're still a top five level team to me if they lose this game, because again, these are two top five teams in the league. But like you mentioned, I mean, Vic Fangio and this defense has been getting better and better each week. And when you add the best corner in football back to that, well, second best to PS2, but when you
Yeah.
add an elite level cornerback to this defense, I mean, you're going to look even more dangerous, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
But I think this is a game where it comes down to the wire. At least we hope. And let's say Devontae Smith has a get right game against the Miami Dolphins. I can't talk here, but stick with me.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts here about the Sunday night game?
No, man, this is definitely game of the week
Yeah,
by
game of the
far.
week, no doubt. But moving over here to Monday night, we have the San Francisco 49ers coming off of an embarrassing loss, regardless of how great the defense there is in Cleveland. And they're coming off of an embarrassing loss, and they get to play the Minnesota Vikings. The San Francisco 49ers, last week they got banged up. And they might
Yeah,
have to check the Browns for Bounty Gate. As Debo Samuel had a shoulder injury, I believe. I know Christian McCaffrey had an oblique injury. He might miss this week, but he also might play through it. I can also see them going on the side of caution with CMC's injury history and not playing him this week. I don't think they'll need him. And also Trent Williams he was banged up there in that first quarter against the
yeah,
Browns. On the flip side, though, there's no Justin Jefferson in this matchup for the Minnesota Vikings. And if you wanted to pick the Vikings, maybe that was your reason why. But for me, I think San Fran is going to win this game pretty easily. I think honestly by a couple scores, as they're going to come into this game with a chip on their shoulder.
yeah. I'm taking the Niners, easily in this game. You know, this game for them, they're not really going in worried. The Vikings missing Justin Jefferson. It's kind of going to take a toll on them. I mean, this defense is still going to carry them through this game. Worst case scenario, if the Niners struggle offensively, and if I'm the Niners right now, I'm going to take it easy. I'm going to rest CMC.
Thank you.
I'm going to rest Debo. Arguably even Trent, and kind of just say, hey, I'm going to force the Vikings to score 30 points on us this game. Our defense is still better than their offense. We're still going to control this game, control the pace of this game, force turnovers, force Kirk Cousins to beat us without his number one receiver. And so I'm taking the Niners easily this game.
Yeah, I mean, Kirk Cousins. I mean, I do want to put some respect on Kevin O'Connell. I think he's a very underrated coach, and I think
Yeah,
Minnesota is an okay team. They just haven't had some things go their way early in the season. But again, they just very tough matchup here. You're going to be in catch up mode all game, and even if it's a close game, as much as I love Jordan Addison, I think he was my rookie of the year prediction coming into the year. As much as I love him and the talent, you're going to be relying on him as your number one receiver against the best defense in football or the second best defense in football. Um,
exactly.
and obviously Fred Warner is going to have Hawkinson in Alcatraz. Um, so no doubt here, San Fran. I just would like to maybe see an upset here. Maybe it's upset of the week. I guess we'll have to see here in a second. You wanted to add this to the show, and I agreed. So we're going to add it to the show. Who is your upset pick of the week? Of course, it's on the screen, but go ahead and explain your reasoning why you have the Arizona Cardinals over the Seattle Seahawks in possibly the upset of the week.
Yeah, so for me, as I was looking at all these games, this game to me would make the most sense to be upset of the week. Obviously, the past 2 weeks, the Cardinals have have kind of went back to their old selves. Has lost, both their games by 14 plus, pretty easily. But I mean, it's a divisional game. Divisional games are always tough. You know, um, and we've seen the Cardinals keep games competitive and games close against competitive teams. I think this is another game where this could be either very bad for Seattle or Seattle just completely blows them out the water.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
Seattle.
I'm leaning more towards the upset this week.
Yeah, I mean Seattle. Their 3 wins haven't come against the greatest slate of opponents
Yeah,
aside from Detroit. So they could be just a fraud 3-2 team. And I think if they lose 2 in a row, especially one to Arizona, they could be on a downward spiral. But my game, like I mentioned heavily earlier, my upset of the week is going to be the Indianapolis Colts. Even though they're home, they are underdogs in the matchup against the Browns. And I think it just could be a trap game. You know, we've seen this so many times as Browns fans where we get a win like that, and then we come into the next week where you know we're not as locked in as we were the week before, and we
Yeah.
don't take the opponent seriously, or at least not as serious as we should, and we end up with an embarrassing loss. It happened last year with that Jets in week 2, also against the Falcons before they were proven in week 3 or 4, whatever it was last year. I'm going to take the Colts as my upset of the week, as if there was one. I think the Colts can dominate the ground early on, and the Browns find themselves in a big hole. But moving
Yeah.
over here to the hot take, and let me explain mine first because I'm not saying that I love the Minnesota Vikings. I think the San Francisco 49ers will win by such of a big margin. I think they hold the Minnesota Vikings to 3 points or less this game.
Yeesh.
And I think the Niners will actually come into this game and dominate. And even though they're on the road, San Francisco is going to have a chip on the shoulder, and not a lot is in the favor of the Minnesota Vikings.
Man, that's an interesting hot take, but I could definitely see it. For my hot take, I'm going with McCall Hardman's going to come back to KC. His comeback game. He's going to have his second 100-yard receiving game of his career. He's going to come back. The crowd's going to
Wow,
be
he only has one.
only has one. I think it was
Wow.
in 2021, if I'm not mistaken. And he's going to come back in. He's honestly going to be involved with the crowd. He was in New York, looking to kind of build more on his career, kind of progress. But New York, has barely used him, and so he has a chip on his shoulder. And he's also going against, arguably the worst secondary in the league. I mean, the worst defense, not secondary, the worst defense in the league. Against a team that just traded J.C. Jackson, the number one DB, and so you know, I think everything is pointing towards a huge game for him.
Yeah, I mean, not, to add on to what you just said, the Chargers have the 32nd pass defense in the NFL and the 31st overall defense. So you could basically say they are the worst defense in the NFL. But definitely an interesting hot take. I did not know that McCole Hardman only had one game in his career because he's one of those deep threat guys that he has two big catches a game and then boom, he's over 100. But that's interesting that he has not. But moving over to player of the week, my player of the week, like I mentioned earlier, despite a loss, and this might, it's counterintuitive. I think if the Falcons do win this game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, it's going to be a big Bijan game. We've seen a couple highlights here and there. We've seen a couple flashes of greatness, but we haven't had that full game yet where he has 2 or 3 touchdowns, goes for over 100 yards, and just is dominant. I think this could be the week against again, the Tampa Bay Bucks have a good front led by Vita Vea. They have a really good, solid defense. So it doesn't make any sense why that breakout game would come here, but the NFL is weird. So I'm going to take Bijan as my potential player of the week to have his first breakout superstardom game.
Yeah, so for me, I'm gonna take Ayuk here. Like I just said, the Niners might end up resting Debo. This is a game that they obviously feel like they can win with or without their top players. I mean, Ayuk is just showing week to week why he's the number one receiver. And he's kind of proven himself. This is a perfect matchup for him. He's going against the Vikings, who the Niners are obviously going to hold the limited possessions. The Niners are going to control the possession, the possession time of this game. He's going to have every opportunity to eat and dominate, especially if McCaffrey doesn't play. They're going to pretty much, try to force Brock Purdy to use his arm a little more. I see Ayuk, catching over for, 150 yards this game, possibly a touchdown or two.
Absolutely. The San Fran, like I mentioned, I think they're gonna have a pretty easy game here against the Minnesota Vikings. But that is ultimately going to do it here for today's show. I mean, this is a jam-packed Thursday. I'm not sure how long this is going to be, but we wanted to add to these shows. I didn't want to get rid of the power rankings, and I didn't want to get rid of the players of the week. So every single Thursday, Amir, so now, I'm going to be bringing the updated top 10 and some players of the week for you, and maybe some honorable mentions along the way. But, I mean, we did everything. We ran through the matchups, talked about the bye weeks, power rankings, top 10s, hot takes, and more. So we did everything here. Any last thoughts before we get out of here for week 7?
Nah, man, this is a great episode here. I'm excited for next week. Excited to, beat on, this week as far as my picks for, and pretty much take control of this podcast.
Okay. All right. Oh, I do want to ask you this, actually. This is something that we talked about a couple weeks back off the show. If a couple weeks back, I think it was probably three weeks ago at this point, You said you had the Dallas Cowboys as your Super Bowl favorite at that point in time. Week by week, I want to ask you this question, and we'll add it to the screen next week. Who is your Super Bowl favorite as of today going into week 7? As I'll answer this question as well. Or
I
maybe
honestly
even you can
hate.
also give us your AFC and NFC favorite if you want to do that.
Yeah, so I honestly hate being, the kind of person that's just, picking the favorite. But if I had to choose, a team to, be my favorite as Super Bowl favorites, I mean, it'd be the Niners. The Niners haven't showed, or gave me a reason why they shouldn't be the favorites. I mean, this team is dominant on both sides of the ball. But besides last week, playing against the best defense in football, I mean, this team is out here just whooping teams left and right, week by week, and this schedule, honestly, isn't that tough for the rest of the year, and so they can go into the playoffs, being confident, get a first round bye, and that's my favorite for the NFC. For the AFC, I'm gonna go with Miami here. Miami is only gonna get better when Ramsey comes back. Their biggest weakness has been the secondary. Man, they're dominant on the run game, pass game. Mike McDaniels is showing, why this team is the most explosive offensive football. It's arguably, one of the greatest offenses I've ever seen in my lifetime. I've never seen a team this dominant in the pass and on the run game. And I don't see any defensive football stopping this team.
I mean, not to pat my own back, but I did have them as a top 3, top 4 level team coming into the season. Of course, that's documented here on the podcast. But my AFC favorite, for the sake of my take that I had in the offseason, I'll stick with the Bengals. Let's see if they can keep it going.
Yeah.
But my Super Bowl favorite as of right now, and it was before the season, well, at least from the NFC side of things, I'm going to have the Eagles. So my power rankings before I guess I'll say this. I made a video where I had some bold predictions. I know you remember that because we talked about Sean McVay. Um, coming into the year, I said that it was going to be the Bengals and the Eagles. I think the Eagles are still my NFC favorites, even though they haven't looked the greatest. I think
Yeah.
at full strength, or I think if they're clicking on all cylinders, we saw it in the Super Bowl last year. Very few teams can beat them. I mean, if Pat Mahomes didn't play on a broken ankle or whatever it was, the Chiefs weren't going to win that game. So
Yeah.
the Eagles, to me, still my NFC favorite. The Bengals, for the sake of my take in the offseason, I'm going to hold on to them at least to the midseason mark. But that is, again, going to do it for today's show. Any thoughts before we get out of here? I know you kind of already touched on it.
This is a great episode, man. I love being on the show. Love feeling welcome on the show. And I'll definitely be here next week, ready to go.
Yeah, I mean, next week, I mean, every single week we're going to try and bring someone on additional to us. So if, maybe we can get 3 people on a podcast one of these weeks, but I'll get you guys out of here until tomorrow. Stay happy, stay healthy. We're out of here.